5 years. That's how long the chain had been rattling against concrete in that backyard in rural Ohio. A small, tired sound like loose change in an old man's pocket. Every morning, every night. Through summer heat that made the metal burn and winter cold that made it stick to fur. The neighbors heard it. Folks. They heard it and told themselves it wasn't their business. Here's the thing about cruelty, it doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it looks like an ordinary house with peeling yellow paint and newspapers piled on the porch. Sometimes it smells like rust and wet earth and something alive that's been forgotten. This is the story of a German shepherd named Rex, and the moment just one gentle touch behind his ear that made him do something that stopped a woman cold. He wept. Real tears. Sliding down into dirt he'd been staring at for 1,825 days. What kind of life makes a dog cry from kindness? Let me tell you. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The Peterson property sat at the end of Riddle Creek Road, where the asphalt crumbled into gravel and the gravel gave way to red Ohio mud. Faded yellow siding. A barn with half its roof caved in. Newspapers from 3 weeks back piled on the porch. Swollen and yellow from rain. Nobody bothered to bring them in from. Behind the house. A backyard no one visited anymore. The chain was 8 feet long, rusted where it met the collar, the color of dried blood, bolted to a concrete block that had cracked down the middle but still held. At the end of that chain, a circle, perfect, precise, a ring of dead earth where grass had quit trying years ago. The water bowl lay tipped near the fence. Cracked plastic, bone dry. Wind knocked it over last Tuesday. Nobody said it right. The doghouse collapsed 2 winters back during an ice storm. Branch came down, punched straight through the roof. Rex crawled out, shook the snow from his coat, waited for someone to fix it. Nobody came. Inside the house, the smell of coffee and burnt margarine drifted from the kitchen. Harold Peterson sat at the same table he'd sat at for 37 years of marriage, reading the same newspaper he'd read every morning since Nixon was in office. The kitchen window faced the backyard. He never looked out. The television murmured from the living room. Some morning show. Voices talking about nothing. A clock on the wall ticked off seconds nobody counted. Margaret used to look out that window 3 years ago, during a bad thunderstorm. She'd found Rex shivering against the collapsed doghouse. Soaked through, eyes squeezed shut against the lightning. She'd grabbed a towel from the bathroom, an old one, thin from too many washes, and walked outside. Harold's voice from the doorway. "What are you doing?" "He's freezing. Harold, he's a dog, not a child." The towel hung heavy in her hands. Rain ran down her face, into her collar. She put the towel back, moved to the guest bedroom that same week. They never talked about why. Ruth Henderson lived next door, 74, widow, walked the same route every evening past the Peterson fence for 5 years. She'd heard that chain, exposed her to that small scraping sound, told herself, not my business. Last night, a thunderstorm rolled through. Ruth heard something through her window. Not the chain. Whimpering. Low. Steady. Like a child crying in a room down the hall. She didn't sleep a wink. This morning, her hand trembled as she reached for the telephone. Ruth's kitchen smelled like cold coffee and loneliness. The pot on the counter had been sitting since yesterday morning. She hadn't bothered to pour it out. Hadn't bothered with much of anything since Earl passed. 6 years now. The house still smelled like him sometimes. Old Spice and pipe tobacco, but that was probably just her mind playing tricks. The telephone sat on the wall next to the refrigerator. Harvest Gold. Same phone they'd installed in 1978. The cord was tangled from decades of pacing while she talked. Ruth stared at it. Her hand shook. She dialed the first 6 numbers 3 times already. Each time, she'd hung up before finishing. Outside the window, the morning was gray, overcast. The kind of Ohio sky that couldn't decide between rain and just staying miserable. A cardinal sat on the fence post, Earl's favorite bird. He used to fill the feeder every Sunday. The feeder was empty now. Ruth picked up the phone, dialed all 7 numbers, listened to it ring. A woman's voice answered. Young, professional. County Animal Services. How can I help you? Ruth opened her mouth. The word she'd rehearsed in her head 100 times, 1,000 times caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. Ma'am, are you there? Yes. Her voice cracked like old leather. I need to report. There's a dog next door. He's been chained up for a long time. How long, ma'am? Ruth closed her eyes. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. 5 years. Silence on the line. I should have called sooner. The words spilled out now. Unstoppable. Like water through a cracked dam. I know that. I've known for years. I kept thinking someone else would do something. Someone who knew them better. Someone closer. And her free hand gripped the counter. Her knuckles went white. But nobody did. And I didn't either. Until now. The dispatcher asked for the address. Ruth gave it. Then added. Her voice barely above a whisper. His name is Rex. The dog. I don't know if that matters to you folks. It mattered. Emily Carter pulled the file from the stack at 9:47 a.m. The shelter office smelled like wet dog and industrial cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone's radio played oldies in the back, Patsy Cline singing about falling to pieces. Standard case file, address on Riddle Creek Road. Notes typed in the dispatcher's shorthand. Possible neglect. Dog chained outdoors. Caller reports minimal food/water. Caller emotional. 5 years. 5 years. Emily read the number twice. Her coffee went cold in her hand. Most neglect cases were months. A bad stretch. A job lost. Someone who meant well but couldn't cope. 5 years was something else entirely. She grabbed her kit from the supply closet. Collar cutter, slip lead, blankets, water bottle. The same tools she'd packed 1,000 times before. Her truck sat in the parking lot, baking in the weak morning sun. The bumper sticker was peeling at the corners now. Who rescued who? She'd stuck it on 3 years ago, the week after Biscuit died. A yellow lab with a graying muzzle and trusting eyes. She'd gotten the call too late. By the time she arrived, it was already gone. The engine turned over on the second try. Needed a new starter. Added it to the list of things she couldn't afford. She pulled onto the road. Not this time. The Peterson house looked abandoned from the road. Paint peeling in long strips, like skin after a sunburn. Lawn overgrown, gone to seed. A mailbox leaning at an angle, mouth hanging open, stuffed with flyers nobody wanted. But a television flickered through the front window. Someone was home. Officer Daniel Cooper walked beside Emily around the side of the house. 45. Former Army. 2 tours in a desert he never talked about. He didn't say much. Noticed everything. They rounded the corner into the backyard. Emily saw the chain first. 8 feet of rusted links, bolted to a cracked concrete block. Then the circle, that perfect ring of dead earth where nothing grew. The smell hit her next waist, and wet fur and something sour, like meat left too long in the sun. Then Rex. He lay at the far edge of his radius, pressed against the dirt like he was trying to sink into it and disappear. Ribs pushed through his coat like fingers under a worn blanket. Patches of fur were missing along his spine, the skin beneath raw, red, angry. The collar sat too tight. She could see where it had worn a groove into his neck. The fur rubbed away to nothing but scar tissue. His eyes were open, looking at nothing. Emily had seen fear before, seen aggression. Dogs who lunged at the end of their chains, teeth bared, ready to fight. Dogs who cowered and snapped. Dogs who ran the moment they got free. Rex did none of these things. He lay still, chest rising, falling, existing. Nothing more. Cooper knocked on his front door. 3 sharp raps. The sound of his knuckles on wood echoed across the empty yard. Footsteps inside. Slow, unhurried. The door opened. Harold Peterson stood in the frame. Slippers. Coffee mug in his right hand. Steam rising. 62 years old, but looking older. His eyes moved from Cooper's uniform to Emily's shelter jacket. Then back again. "Help you?" "Sir, we're here about the dog in your backyard." Harold's face didn't change. Not a flicker. "What about him?" "We've received a complaint. Possible neglect." A sigh. Harold set his mug on the hallway table, next to a stack of unopened mail. "This again. Look, he's got food. He's got water. He's got shelter." Emily stepped forward. The smell of burnt toast drifted from inside. "Mr. Peterson, the water bowl is empty. The doghouse roof is collapsed. I'll get around to it." "When's the last time you touched him?" Harold blinked. The question hung between them like smoke. Touched him, petted him, talked to him, looked at him. Silence. The television murmured somewhere deeper in the house. A game show. Applause. Bells ringing. "He's a guard dog." Harold's voice flattened. "He guards. That's what I bought him for." "Has he ever barked?" "No." Something shifted behind Harold's eyes. "Useless that way. But that's not my fault." A shadow moved in the hallway behind him. Emily's gaze shifted. Margaret Peterson stood at the edge of the kitchen, mid-50s, thin, worn, a dish towel twisted between her hands, wound so tight her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes met Emily's. Something passed between them. A flicker. Recognition. Maybe. Or relief. Then Margaret turned. Disappeared back into the dark of the house. Harold didn't notice. Cooper explained the situation in the driveway, his voice low and even. "Current county law makes this tricky. The dog technically has access to shelter, food, water. Prosecution would be an uphill climb." Emily's fingernails dug into her palms. "Tricky. But..." Cooper pulled a form from his clipboard. "We can offer voluntary surrender. Owner signs. We take the animal. No charges. No court. Clean and simple. And if he says no..." Cooper didn't answer. Didn't need to. They walked back to the front door. Knocked again. Harold answered with the same flat expression. Cooper extended the clipboard. "Mr. Peterson, we're offering you the opportunity to voluntarily surrender the animal. You sign this paper, and..." Harold laughed. Short, bitter, like something caught in his throat he couldn't quite cough up. "You want him?" He grabbed the pen, scrawled his name across the bottom without reading a single word. "Take him. 5 years. Never barked once. Never did a darn thing I bought him for. He shoved the clipboard back at Cooper. He's useless. Always was. The door closed. The deadbolt clicked. Emily knelt beside Rex. Her knees pressed into the cold, hard dirt. Her hands trembled as she worked the clasp on the collar. Rust had fused part of it shut. She pressed harder. The metal bit into her fingers, drawing a thin line of blood she didn't notice. Rex didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't look at her. The clasp gave way with a grinding snap. The collar fell into the dirt. The chain lay still for the first time in 5 years. Rex didn't stand, didn't run, didn't turn his head. He exhaled. Long. Slow. A breath that seemed to empty him completely, like air leaving a tire that had been holding pressure for too long. Emily slid her arms beneath him, lifted. He weighed nothing, 50 pounds at most, when he should have been 80. She could feel every rib against her forearms, every bump of his spine against her chest. She carried him to the truck, laid him on the blanket in the back seat. He didn't resist, didn't help, just let himself be moved, like a sack of old laundry. As she pulled out of the driveway, gravel crunching under her tires, she checked the rearview mirror. Ruth Henderson stood at the edge of her property, watching. One hand raised, not a wave. Exactly. An acknowledgement. Emily nodded. The truck turned onto Riddle Creek Road. The Peterson house grew smaller in the mirror, then disappeared around a bend. In the back seat, Rex lay motionless, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Then so small, Emily almost missed it. His nose twitched, his nostrils flared. Once. Twice. He was smelling something. Fresh air. Moving air. Air that didn't smell like rust and waste and his own dying. And for the first time in 5 years. Rex lifted his head. The clinic smelled like rubbing alcohol and wet fur, and something underneath that faint copper scent that meant an animal had bled somewhere recently and someone had mopped it up, but not well enough. Emily carried Rex through the back entrance. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering in that irregular rhythm that could drive a person crazy if they paid attention long enough. Her arms ached. Rex weighed almost nothing, but she'd been holding him the same way for 20 minutes, afraid to shift, afraid to jostle, afraid he'd break. Dr. Michael Torres stood waiting by the exam table. 58 years old, gray at the temples, silver in the stubble he hadn't shaved this morning. Hands that had touched 10,000 animals over 32 years, steady hands. Even now. He didn't speak when Emily came in, just pointed to the table. She laid Rex down. The stainless steel was cold. She could feel it through her sleeves where her arms had pressed against it. Rex didn't react, didn't flinch at the chill. Just lay where she put him, like a coat someone had draped over a chair. Michael's hands moved across the dog's body. Professional. Methodical. The same examination he'd done countless times. He pressed 2 fingers against Rex's gums, pulled back the lip to check the color. White as notebook paper. His voice was flat, clinical. Anemia. Bad. He parted the fur along Rex's spine. The skin beneath was raw, red, crawling with tiny black dots that moved when the light hit them. Fleas. Ticks. Secondary infection from all the biting and scratching. He moved to Rex's legs, squeezed what should have been muscle. His jaw tightened. Nothing left here. Wasted away from not moving. Grace, his assistant, stood in the corner with a clipboard. 24 years old, 2 years out of tech school. Her pen shook as she wrote, making the letters uneven. Michael lifted Rex's head, looked into his eyes. The dog didn't resist, didn't lean into the touch, didn't pull away. Just let it happen. The way a person lets rain fall on them when they've stopped caring about getting wet. Skinny as a fence post, Michael said quietly. Worst I've seen in 30 years. Emily's throat tightened. What do we do? IV fluids. Blood transfusion, maybe 2. Antibiotics for the infection. Medicated baths. Michael washed his hands at the sink. The water ran slightly pink before clearing. That's the body. And the rest? He dried his hands on a paper towel. The dispenser squeaked when he pulled more. The rest isn't something I can fix. He turned to face her. His eyes were tired, the tired of a man who'd seen too much and kept showing up anyway. He's given up. Stopped believing anything he does makes a difference. You can see it in how he doesn't react to anything. No fight, no fear. Nothing. So what happens? We do everything we can for his body. And then we wait. See if he decides he wants to stay. They placed Rex in a recovery kennel, the back corner of the clinic, away from the barking dogs in the main ward. Quieter here. Just the hum of the refrigerator that held the medications, and the distant sound of a radio someone had left on country music. An old Merle Haggard song about being on the run. Clean blankets lined the kennel floor. Soft bedding. A water bowl filled to the brim, fresh and clear. Kibble in a ceramic dish, the good stuff. Not the cheap brand. Rex stood in the corner. His legs shook from the effort. His head hung so low his nose nearly touched the ground. But he stood, facing the wall, as far from the bedding as the kennel would allow. Emily watched through the glass. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, drawn, a woman who hadn't slept enough in years. Why won't he lie down? Michael stood beside her, arms crossed. The fluorescent light made shadows under his eyes. He doesn't know he's allowed. The words sat in Emily's chest like stones. She stayed past her shift. The sky outside the windows turned from gray to orange to black. Grace offered to bring her supper from the diner down the street, meatloaf special. Mashed potatoes. The works. Emily shook her head without looking away from the kennel. At 11 p.m., Michael went home. His truck coughed to life in the parking lot, headlights sweeping across the windows before disappearing down the road. Grace left at midnight. She touched Emily's shoulder on the way out. Didn't say anything. Just touched her shoulder and left. Emily pulled a plastic chair next to the kennel door. The legs scraped against the linoleum. She sat. She didn't speak. Didn't call Rex's name. Didn't tap on the glass or make encouraging sounds. She just sat. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed, somewhere in the building. A pipe rattled old plumbing, the kind that groaned when the temperature dropped. At 1:15 a.m., Rex's legs buckled. He collapsed onto the concrete floor of the kennel, still in the corner, still facing the wall. At 2:30 a.m., his head turned. Slowly, his eyes found Emily through the glass. She didn't move. At 3:47 a.m., Rex took one step toward the blanket. He stopped, looked at Emily again. His whole body trembled, not from cold, not from fever, from something else. Like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to step back or step forward. She held her breath, held absolutely still. He took another step, then another. He lowered himself to the ground. Not on the blanket. Beside it. close enough to feel its edge against his matted fur, close enough to know it was there. His eyes closed. Emily didn't move until the first gray light of morning crept through the windows. Day 2. Rex ate 3 bites of wet food from Grace's hand. Then he turned away. Day 3. He stopped. His body, hollowed out by 5 years of nothing, began to fold in on itself. The IV fluids weren't enough. The transfusion wasn't enough. His kidneys struggled. His insides started failing, one piece at a time, like an old house finally giving up after years of neglect. Michael called Emily at 2:14 a.m. His voice was rough with sleep and something else. "You should come." She drove through empty streets. Red lights she rolled through without stopping, no cars, no cops, no one to see. Rain started somewhere around Miller Road, fat drops that splattered against the windshield and made the headlights blur. The clinic was dark except for the glow from the recovery room. A single window, lit yellow against the black. She pushed through the back door. The smell hit her first antiseptic, stronger now, fierce sweat, something metallic. Rex lay on his side in the kennel, an oxygen tube taped near his nose, hissing softly. IV line running into his front leg, the bag hanging nearly empty. His breathing was wrong, too fast, too shallow. His ribs rose and fell like wings on a bird too tired to fly. Grace sat in the corner, her face wet. She didn't look up. Michael stood by the kennel door. His hand rested on the latch. "We've done everything medical." His voice was quiet, barely above the hiss of the oxygen. His body's deciding now. Stay or go. Emily's knees hit the cold linoleum before she realized she'd moved. The chill seeped through her jeans. She pressed her palm against the kennel door. Rex's eyes were half open, glassy, looking at something far away or nothing at all. She wanted to say fight, wanted to say stay, wanted to say don't give up. But those words were for people. Dogs don't understand speeches. They don't respond to desperation or bargaining or promises of better days ahead. She opened the kennel door, reached inside, placed her hand on Rex's side. His fur was coarse, thin. She could feel his heart beating beneath her palm, fast, unsteady, a drum losing its rhythm. She didn't speak. She rested her forehead against the cold metal frame of the kennel, closed her eyes, felt his heartbeat against her hand, and matched her breathing to his. In, out, in, out. The rain tapped against the windows. The oxygen machine hissed. The fluorescent light flickered once, twice, then steadied. Grace fell asleep in her chair sometime around 4 a.m., her head tipped back against the wall. Emily stayed. At 4:30 a.m., something changed. Rex's breathing slowed, deepened. At 5:15 a.m., his heart steadied, still fast, but steady. At 6:22 a.m., light broke through the clinic windows. Gray first, the color of old dishwater, then gold. Michael found Emily on the floor, her hand still on Rex's side, her forehead still pressed against the kennel frame. She'd fallen asleep like that, kneeling, hunched over, neck bent at an angle that would hurt for days. He checked Rex's vitals, pulse stronger, gums showing the faintest hint of pink, like color returning to a faded photograph. He didn't wake her. Instead, he walked to the supply closet, found a wool blanket, an old one, left behind by some client years ago. He draped it over Emily's shoulders. Then he went to make coffee. Emily opened her eyes at 8:47 a.m. Her neck screamed. Her hand was numb, pins and needles running from her wrist to her fingertips. Rex was watching her, not staring into space, not looking at the wall. Watching her. His tail lay flat against the blanket. Motionless. Then so small she almost missed it. The tip moved. A twitch. A single, tiny wag. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She reached through the kennel door, extended her fingers toward his nose. Rex stretched his neck forward. His nostrils flared. He sniffed her hand once. Twice. Then he did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He leaned in, his head pressed against her palm. Light. Tentative. Like a child reaching for a hand they're not sure will reach back. Emily didn't move. Didn't breathe. Rex had made a choice. But surviving one night didn't mean surviving the next. His body was still broken. His spirit still cracked. And somewhere on Riddle Creek Road, a man who'd signed away a life without reading a single word was pouring his morning coffee, unaware that the dog he'd called useless had just done the hardest thing any living creature can do. He'd chosen to keep going. Day 4. Rex ate. Emily held the bowl steady. Wet food, turkey and rice. The kind that smelled like Thanksgiving dinner at her grandmother's house. Back when her grandmother was still alive and the family still gathered. The steam rose in thin wisps, carrying that warm, meaty scent through the recovery room. Rex's nose twitched. He leaned forward. His tongue touched the food. One bite. He chewed slowly, like he'd forgotten how. Swallowed. Another bite. Then another. Then he stopped, pulled back, looked at Emily. She didn't push, didn't coax, just held the bowl and waited. He ate 3 more bites, then turned his head away. Emily pulled a small notebook from her back pocket, spiral-bound, the kind she'd used for grocery lists before it became something else. Day 4. 6 bites, approximately 2 tablespoons. It wasn't much, but yesterday, he'd eaten nothing. Day 5. Rex stood when Emily entered the room. Not excitement. His tail didn't wag, his ears didn't perk forward. But his head lifted from the blanket. His eyes tracked her movement from the door to his kennel. He knew her footsteps now. The particular rhythm of her boots on linoleum. The slight squeak of her left sole that she kept meaning to fix. Grace noticed from across the room, where she was filling water bowls. He didn't do that for me. Emily knelt by the kennel door. The linoleum was cold through her jeans. Rex watched her. Still, waiting. "Hey there," she said softly. His tail moved. Not a wag. A single twitch, the tip lifting half an inch off the blanket, then settling back down, like a muscle remembering something it had forgotten how to do. Day 6. Grace dropped the metal bowl. She was carrying it from the sink to the supply shelf, stainless steel, the heavy kind when it slipped from her wet fingers. Hit the concrete floor with a crash that echoed through the recovery room like a gunshot. Rex flinched. His whole body jerked, ears flattened against his skull. He pressed himself into the back corner of the kennel, legs scrambling against the blanket, eyes wide and white-rimmed. Grace froze. Her hand flew to her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." Emily held up her palm. "Wait." She watched Rex. His chest heaved. His breath came fast, short. Sharp pants. His eyes darted between the fallen bowl and the kennel door, calculating distances, measuring threats that existed only in his memory. Fear. Real fear. Emily felt something shift in her chest. Not sadness, something sharper, something that almost felt like hope. Rex was feeling again. It took 20 minutes for his breathing to slow. 20 minutes of Emily sitting perfectly still by the kennel door. Not speaking, not reaching inside, just being there. The way you sit with someone in a hospital room when there's nothing to say, but you can't leave them alone. When he finally uncurled from the corner, his legs were still trembling, but he was feeling. Day 7. His tail wagged. Emily was refilling his water bowl, the ceramic one, blue with white paw prints around the rim when she heard it. A soft sound behind her, rhythmic, like someone patting a pillow. Thump, thump, thump. She turned. Rex was watching her, and his tail that matted. Thin tail with the bald patches where the fur had rubbed away was hitting the blanket beneath him. Not fast, not the frantic wagging of a puppy, just a slow, steady beat, like a heart learning to keep time again. Grace saw it from across the room. Her clipboard clattered against the counter. Her hand covered her mouth. Emily set down the water bowl, knelt by the kennel. The smell of wet dog and medicated shampoo drifted through the bars. They'd given him his first bath 2 days ago, and the antibiotic soap had a sharp, medicinal edge. Rex's tail kept moving. Thump, thump, thump. Good boy, Emily whispered. The tail moved faster. Day 8. Emily brought the bed. She'd found it in the shelter's donation closet, buried under a pile of old leashes and moth-eaten sweaters. Orthopedic foam. Blue fleece cover. Soft as rabbit fur. Someone had dropped it off 6 months ago with a handwritten note safety pinned to the tag for a dog who needs it. M.K. She had never found the right dog. Until now. She carried it into the recovery room, set it inside Rex's kennel, pushing aside the thin blanket he'd been sleeping on. He was standing now most of the time. Anyway, his legs had strengthened enough to hold him for more than a few minutes. Michael said another week and they could try short walks. Rex watched the bed. His nose worked the air, pulling in the scent of new fabric and foam and something else, the faint ghost of whoever had owned it before. Some other dog in some other life. He stepped toward it. Stopped. Stepped back. Emily lowered herself to the floor outside the kennel. The concrete was cold. She could feel it through her jeans, through her bones. She waited. Rex circled the bed. Once, twice, 3 times. His paws touched the edge of the foam. He pulled back like it had burned him. He looked at Emily. She didn't move, didn't encourage, didn't say a word. He circled again. Slower this time. His nose pressed into the fleece, leaving a small, damp spot where his breath fogged the fabric. Then he stepped onto the bed. Front paws first, testing the give. The way you test ice before trusting it with your weight. Then his back legs. The foam yielded beneath him. Soft, forgiving, shaping itself to his body instead of forcing his body to shape itself to the ground. He lowered himself down. His chest touched the fleece. His head settled onto the cushion. His eyes drifted half closed. And then Emily saw it. Liquid gathering at the corners of his eyes. Pooling. Spilling over. Tears. Real tears. sliding down the ridge of his muzzle, darkening the blue fabric beneath his face. Rex was crying, not whimpering, not howling. Crying. His body shook with small, silent tremors, the kind that come from somewhere deeper than muscle, deeper than bone. The tears kept coming, sliding down his face, soaking into the fleece. Emily couldn't move. Grace appeared in the doorway, stopped. Her clipboard hit the floor with a clatter she didn't notice. Michael came running from the back, footsteps heavy on the linoleum. He saw Rex, saw the tears, stopped beside Grace. No one spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed. The refrigerator in the corner clicked on, its motor rattling the way it always did. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the road, tires hissing on wet pavement. And in the kennel, a dog cried for the first time in his life, not from pain, not from fear, from something he had no name, for something that had been locked so deep inside him that the only way it could escape was through his eyes. The tears lasted 3 minutes, maybe 4. Then Rex's breathing slowed, his body relaxed into the foam, sinking deeper, letting go. He slept. Emily sat on the floor for another 2 hours, watching his chest rise and fall, watching the wet spot on the fleece slowly fade. She didn't wipe her own face until she was sure he wouldn't wake. Weeks 2 through 4. Rex learned to walk again. Short distances at first. Down the hallway, past the supply closet, past the room where they kept the cats. Back to his kennel. His legs shook with every step. His hips swayed like a sailor on a rolling deck. But he walked. Emily stayed beside him, never pulling the leash, never rushing, just walking, the way you walk with someone who's learning to trust the ground again. The shelter hallway smelled like pine sol and kibble. Their footsteps echoed Emily's boots, Rex's nails clicking on the linoleum. Sometimes he'd stop and sniff a corner, catching some scent she couldn't detect. She let him, gave him all the time he needed. By week 3, he could circle the outdoor yard twice without stopping. The grass was still brown from winter, but there were green patches pushing through, and Rex would lower his nose to them, breathing deep. By week 4, he ran. Not far, not fast, just a few bounding steps across the yard, 3, maybe 4 before his legs gave out and he tumbled onto his side, panting. But for those few seconds, his ears were up, his tongue hung out, his tail whipped back and forth like a flag in a high wind. He looked like a dog. The nightmares came at night. Emily found him one morning pressed into the corner of his kennel. The bedding was shredded blue fleece torn into strips, foam scattered like snow, claw marks on the floor where he'd scraped at the concrete. His eyes were wild, unfocused, seeing something that wasn't there. She opened the kennel door, sat down inside, her back against the cold bars, didn't touch him, didn't speak. His breathing slowed. His eyes found her. He crawled toward her, actually crawled, belly dragging on the ground until his head rested against her knee. She placed her hand on his shoulder, felt the tremors running through him like electricity through a bad wire. They sat like that until the sun came up, golden light creeping across the floor like a slow tide. She started reading to him. It felt foolish at first. A grown woman reading out loud to a dog. But Michael had mentioned it something about the rhythm of a human voice, the steadiness, the calm. Dogs didn't understand words, but they understood presence. They understood someone staying. So Emily brought a book from home, an old paperback she'd found in her mother's things after the funeral. The Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway. She'd never finished it. She sat beside Rex's kennel every evening. after the shelter closed and the other workers went home. The building was quiet then, just the hum of the lights and the distant sound of the highway and the soft breathing of animals settling in for the night. She read Hemingway's spare sentences, the old man alone in his boat, the fish pulling him out to sea, the struggle that went on, day after day. Rex didn't understand a word, but his ears turned toward her voice. His eyes softened. His body relaxed against the blue fleece. They'd gotten him a new bed, same kind as before. By the end of week 4, he would rest his head on her lap while she read. She never finished the book, kept starting over from the beginning. Rex didn't seem to mind. Sarah Mitchell drove past the shelter 3 times before she pulled in. Thursday afternoon. The sky was the color of old pewter, threatening rain. Her Subaru, 12 years old, needed new brakes, idled in the parking lot while she gripped the steering wheel and stared at the building. She didn't know why she was here. 2 years since the divorce. 2 years of coming home to a house with 3 bedrooms and 1 person. She graded papers every night until her eyes burned spelling tests, math worksheets, reading comprehension because the silence was worse than exhaustion. The radio played softly. Some oldies station. The Carpenters singing about rainy days and Mondays. She turned it off. She got out of the car, walked inside. The adoption wing was loud. Puppies yapping in one section, climbing over each other, pink tongues and wagging tails. Older dogs in another row barking, pressing against their kennel doors, desperate for attention. A black lab mix jumped so high his nose nearly touched the wire ceiling. Sarah walked past them all. She stopped at the last kennel on the row. A German shepherd lay on a blue fleece bed. He wasn't barking, wasn't pressing against the door, just lying there, head resting on his paws, watching her. His eyes were calm, patient, like he'd been waiting for something and wasn't in any hurry to find out what. That one. Sarah's voice surprised her. She hadn't planned to speak. Tell me about him. Emily appeared beside her. Same shelter jacket, same tired eyes. His name is Rex. He's been through a lot. What happened? Emily paused. Through the kennel bars, Rex watched them both. 5 years chained in a backyard. Neglect. Malnutrition. He almost didn't make it. Sarah looked at Rex. Rex looked back. He's not easy. Emily continued. Still has nightmares. Flinches at loud noises. He's learning. But what? He needs someone patient. Someone who won't give up. Sarah thought about her house. The empty rooms. The yard she never used. The quiet that pressed in every night like something physical. Can I meet him? The meeting room was small. Concrete floor, scuffed and stained. A wooden bench along one wall, the varnish worn smooth by decades of nervous hands. Nothing else. Emily brought Rex in on a leash. He walked slowly, carefully, his nails clicking on the floor. His eyes scanned the room, checking corners, measuring distances. Sarah sat on the floor, cross-legged, hands in her lap. Just let him come to you, Emily said. Don't call him. Don't reach out. Just be here. She unclipped the leash, stepped back. Rex stood in the middle of the room. His nose worked the air. His ears swiveled like satellite dishes, picking up signals. Sarah waited. 1 minute. The clock on the wall ticked. The radiator in the corner clanked old pipes, probably original to the building. 2 minutes. Rex took a step toward her. Stopped. Sniffed the air again. 3 minutes. Another step. Then another. He stopped 2 feet away. Close enough to touch. He didn't sit. Didn't lie down. just stood there, watching her with those patient eyes. Sarah didn't move. 5 minutes passed. The light through the window shifted, clouds moving across the sun. Then Rex did something Emily had never seen him do with anyone but her. He sat down beside Sarah, not facing her, not looking at her, just beside her, like two strangers sharing a park bench, neither one needing to speak. Sarah's eyes filled. She blinked hard, pressing her lips together. "Can I come back tomorrow?" She came back every day for a week. Day 7. Sarah filled out the adoption paperwork. Emily processed the forms at the front desk. Home check scheduled for Monday. References, 3 names. All confirmed. Everything in order. She was reaching for the approval stamp, a faded red thing. The rubber cracked from years of use when the telephone rang. The old rotary phone on the desk. Harvest Gold. Same model as the one in Ruth Henderson's kitchen. Emily picked up the receiver. County Animal Shelter. This is Emily. A man's voice. Flat. Familiar. "I want my dog back." Emily's hand froze over the paperwork. "Who is this Harold Peterson, that German shepherd you took from my property 6 weeks ago? I've changed my mind." The line crackled. Emily gripped the receiver so hard her knuckles went white. "I want him back." Emily's hand was still frozen over the approval stamp when the line went dead. Harold Peterson had hung up. She stared at the receiver. The dial tone hummed that flat, endless note that sounded like nothing and everything at once. Her fingers wouldn't move. Sarah's paperwork sat on the desk. Home check passed. References excellent. Approval pending. 1 stamp. That's all it needed. 1 stamp and Rex would have a home. She set the phone down. The plastic clattered against the desk louder than it should have. Grace looked up from the filing cabinet, eyebrows raised. Emily didn't explain. Just picked up the phone again and dialed the shelter's lawyer. Patricia Dunn's office smelled like old paper and cold coffee. 52 years old, wire-rimmed glasses that she pushed up her nose every few sentences. Filing cabinets lined the walls, stuffed with folders, some of them yellowed at the edges. She spread the Peterson file across her desk. Officer Cooper's report, the surrender form, Harold's signature, that hasty scrawl at the bottom. Here's the problem. Her finger tapped the signature line. This is a voluntary surrender agreement, standard form, but look at the documentation. Emily leaned forward. The desk lamp threw harsh shadows across the paper. I don't see the problem. The problem is what's missing. Patricia flipped to Cooper's incident report. His notes say, owner agreed to relinquish animal, but there's no timestamp for when the form was signed, no witness signature, no documentation of the conversation leading up to the surrender. He signed it in front of us. I watched him do it. Can you prove that? Patricia looked up over her glasses. Is there video, a witness statement with specific times and exact quotes? Emily's stomach dropped. The fluorescent light above flickered. It had been doing that for weeks. Nobody had fixed it. Cooper was there. I was there. And if this goes to court, Mr. Peterson's lawyer will argue the signature was coerced, or obtained under duress, or that Mr. Peterson didn't understand what he was signing. Patricia closed the file. The sound was soft, final. Without clear documentation, this becomes he said, she said. He abandoned that dog for 5 years. Emily's palm hit the desk. A pen rolled off the edge and clattered to the floor. He can't just, Ms. Carter. Patricia's voice stayed level, calm. The voice of someone who delivered bad news 1,000 times. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's the law. And under current Ohio statute, Mr. Peterson has a legitimate claim to his property. property. That's how the law sees it. Patricia removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. I'm sorry. Helen, the shelter director, spoke from the corner of the room, gray hair pulled back in a bun, 63 years old, been running the shelter since Reagan was president. What are our options? Patricia sighed. We have 30 days to respond to his claim. We can fight it, but without solid documentation. She shook her head. And if we lose, we're legally required to return the animal to its owner. Emily's vision blurred. She pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw spots. Return him. After everything. After the tears on the blue fleece. After the first wag of his tail. After watching him learn to trust again. Return him to a chain and a concrete block and a man who walked past the kitchen window every morning without looking out. There has to be another way. Patricia put her glasses back on. I wish there was. Ruth Henderson called that evening. Emily was sitting in the shelter parking lot, engine off, staring at the brick wall of the building. The sky had gone purple, that color between day and night when everything looks uncertain. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Ms. Carter, this is Ruth Henderson, the neighbor who called about Rex. Emily straightened in her seat. Mrs. Henderson, is everything okay? I thought you should know something. Ruth's voice was thin, scratchy, like an old record played too many times. About Harold, about why he wants the dog back. Emily's grip tightened on the phone. I'm listening. I was walking past their house 2 nights ago. Late. Couldn't sleep, my hip was acting up. And walking sometimes helps. Harold was on his front porch, talking on his telephone. Loud. Real loud. What did he say? Ruth paused. Emily could hear her breathing through the line. The sound of an old woman gathering courage. He said the newspaper made him look like a monster. Said everyone at church is talking. Said he needs the dog back to prove he's not what they're saying about him. Emily closed her eyes. The dashboard clock glowed green, 7:47 p.m. He doesn't want Rex. Ruth continued. He wants his reputation back. That's all it is to him. The line went quiet. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, for telling me. Will it help? Emily stared at the brick wall. A moth circled the parking lot light, throwing erratic shadows. I don't know. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. The shelter conference room was small, fluorescent lights overhead, a long table with folding chairs, the smell of stale coffee from the pot someone had made that morning and forgotten to turn off. Harold arrived first. Clean shirt, white, pressed, pants with a crease down the front, hair combed, parted on the left, the way men his age had worn it since they were young. First time Emily had seen him look put together. He sat at the table, hands folded, expression flat. A man who'd come to collect what was his. The shelter director sat across from him. Emily stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the parking lot. Officer Cooper leaned against the wall near the door, his face unreadable. Patricia Dunn had her files spread in front of her, the Peterson file, the surrender form, copies of everything. Mr. Peterson. Patricia's voice was professional, neutral. You've submitted a request to reclaim the German Shepherd currently in our custody. Before we proceed, the dog was my property. Harold's voice cut through hers like a blade through paper. I bought him, fed him, sheltered him. You took him without my proper consent. Sir, you signed a surrender form. Under duress. Harold's jaw tightened. Your officer was standing in my doorway with his uniform and his badge. What was I supposed to say? Emily's fingernails dug into her palms. Crescent moons of pressure. I never laid a hand on that dog, Harold continued. Not once in 5 years. And now you're treating me like some kind of criminal because I didn't give him belly rubs. That's not how the world works. A dog's a dog. You give him food, give him water, give him a place to sleep. That's the arrangement. Mr. Peterson. I want my dog back. That's my right under the law. Silence. The coffee pot in the corner gurgled. The fluorescent light buzzed. The conference room door opened. Sarah Mitchell walked in. Same jacket she'd worn every day at the shelter. Jeans with chalk dust on the knees, she must have come straight from school. A canvas bag over her shoulder, stuffed with papers she hadn't finished grading. I'm sorry to interrupt. Her voice was quiet, steady. I'd like to say something. Helen frowned. Ma'am, this is a private meeting. I know. Sarah stepped forward, stopped at the edge of the table. Her hands slid into her jacket pockets. I'm the one who was going to adopt him. Harold looked at her. Who are you? I'm a teacher, 4th grade, 23 kids. What's that got to do with anything? Sarah took a breath. Her eyes never left Harold's face. Every day, I see kids come to school hungry because nobody made them breakfast. Kids who wear the same shirt 3 days running because nobody did the wash. Kids whose folks never hit them, never yelled at them, just never really saw them. Harold's nostrils flared. You know what I've figured out, Mr. Peterson. Doing nothing isn't the same as not doing anything wrong. It's still a choice. Every morning you walked past that dog. Every morning you looked at your coffee cup instead of out the window. That's not nothing. That's something you decided. You don't know. I know, he cried. Sarah's words landed like stones dropping into still water. First time anybody gave him a soft bed to lie on. A grown dog, crying real tears. You reckon that's normal? You reckon that happens to a dog who was loved? Harold's face flushed red. A vein pulsed at his temple. I'm not asking you to feel bad about yourself. Sarah's voice didn't waver. I'm asking you to let him go. Silence. Harold opened his mouth to speak. Harold. A woman's voice. From the doorway. Everyone turned. Margaret Peterson stood at the threshold. No one had heard her come in. Her face was pale, drawn. Her hands hung at her sides, fingers curled slightly, like she was holding on to something invisible. Margaret? Harold's voice cracked. What are you doing here? She walked into the room, past Officer Cooper, past Emily, stopped 3 feet from the table, close enough to touch but making no move to do so. I hear that chain every night. Harold's expression changed. Something shifted behind his eyes. Even now, even though it's gone, I hear it when I'm trying to fall asleep, when I'm making my coffee in the morning, when I'm sitting in that guest bedroom wondering how we got here. Her voice trembled, steadied. I can't keep doing this. I can't be part of this anymore. Margaret, for pity's sake, let him go, Harold. The words hung in the air. 37 years of marriage. 37 years of silence and separate bedrooms and things left unsaid. And now this, his wife, in a room full of strangers, asking him to give up the one thing he'd come to take back. Harold stared at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. The room waited. The fluorescent light buzzed. The coffee pot gurgled one last time and went silent. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists on the table, knuckles going white. No. Harold drove home from the shelter with both hands on the wheel. His knuckles were white. His jaw ached from clenching. The radio was off. He couldn't stand noise right now. The only sound was the engine and his own breathing, harsh and ragged in the closed cabin. He'd said no. In front of the lawyer. The officer. The shelter woman. That teacher who thought she knew something about life. Margaret. He'd said no. His right. His property. His decision. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. Margaret's Buick was gone. She'd driven herself to the meeting in her own car. Driven herself somewhere else after. He sat in the truck for 10 minutes. 15. The engine cooled with small ticking sounds. The windows fogged from his breath. Then he went inside. The newspaper came on Sunday morning. Harold found it on the porch at 6:47 a.m., same time as always. Dew had soaked through the plastic sleeve. He picked it up with his coffee black, 2 sugars, the way he'd drunk it for 40 years, and carried it to the kitchen table. Local section. Page 3. Below the fold. Neglected dog's owner demands return after rescue. His name was there. In print. Harold Peterson, 62 of Riddle Creek Road. 2 photographs sat side by side. The first Rex the day they found him. Ribs showing through matted fur. Eyes like holes in a blanket. The second Rex now. Coat filling in. Eyes clear. Lying on a blue bed. Looking at the camera like he finally had something to live for. Harold's hand started to shake. Coffee sloshed over the rim of the mug, burning his fingers. He didn't notice. He read the article. Every word. Twice. The dog was chained for approximately 5 years, said Officer Daniel Cooper of County Animal Services. When we arrived, the water bowl was empty. The doghouse had collapsed. Neighbors report hearing the chain for years. I should have called sooner, said Ruth Henderson, 74, who lives next door to the Peterson property. I think about that every day now. The shelter declined to comment on ongoing legal proceedings. Harold set the paper down. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. Church was at 10 a.m. First Methodist. Same as every Sunday since he and Margaret moved to Riddle Creek Road in 1987. He showered, shaved, nicking his chin where the razor caught a fold of skin. Put on his gray suit, the one Margaret had picked out. Back when she still picked out his clothes. He drove alone. Parked in his usual spot, 3rd row from the back, near the big oak tree that had been there longer than the church itself. The parking lot was full. Same faces he'd seen every week for 37 years. The Hendersons, Tom and Linda. Not Ruth. The Carters. The Millers. Old Frank Benson, 92 years old, still drove himself every Sunday. Harold walked toward the entrance. The morning air was cool, carrying the smell of cut grass and motor oil from the auto shop down the block. A cluster of women stood near the door. Mrs. Miller in her blue dress, Mrs. Carter with her purse clutched against her chest. 2 others he recognized but couldn't name. They worked the potluck suppers. He thought. They were talking. Low voices, heads bent together. Then Mrs. Miller looked up. Her eyes met Harold's. The conversation stopped. All 4 women stared at him. Their faces shifted. Not anger. Not quite. Something worse. Judgment. Harold's steps slowed. His hand moved toward the door handle. Mrs. Miller turned away. The others followed. They walked inside without a word, without a glance back. Harold stood on the steps. Alone. The church bells began to ring. 10 o'clock. The sound rolled across the parking lot, across the town, across years of Sundays when he'd walked through those doors and shaken hands and sung hymns and never once felt like a stranger. His hand dropped to his side. He turned around, walked back to his truck, drove home. He didn't go to church the next Sunday, or the one after that. Monday morning, the refrigerator was empty. Harold drove to the Kroger on Main Street. Only grocery store in town had been since the A&P closed in '94. He'd shopped there for 30 years, knew the aisles by heart, knew which cashier was fastest and which one talked too much. He grabbed a cart. The wheels squeaked on the linoleum. That familiar sound of 1,000 ordinary trips. Produce section. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. The smell of overripe bananas and wet lettuce. He reached for a bag of apples, Honeycrisp. Margaret's favorite, though Margaret wasn't home to eat them. A woman in the next aisle glanced at him, 50-something. Red hair going gray. She looked away, then looked back. She leaned toward the man beside her, her husband. Maybe, whispered something behind her hand. Harold's fingers froze over the apples. The man looked up. His eyes found Harold, narrowed. Harold grabbed the apples, dropped them in his cart. The bag split, and 2 apples rolled across the floor. He left them there. Bread aisle. He reached for a loaf of wheat, the kind with the seeds on top, the kind he'd bought every week for decades. Footsteps behind him. He turned. A teenager. 16, maybe 17. Baseball cap turned backward. Phone in his hand, held up at chest level. Their eyes met. The kid's eyes widened. He shoved the phone in his pocket and walked away fast, sneakers squeaking on the floor. Harold's face burned. His ears felt hot. His throat tightened. He pushed his cart toward the checkout. 3 people ahead of him. He stared at the magazine rack. Celebrity faces. Diet tips. Scandal headlines. Anything to avoid looking at the people around him. The woman in front of him turned. Mid-40s. Blonde hair cut short. He'd seen her before she worked at the bank. Sat behind the window where he deposited his pension check. She stared at him. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Aren't you the one from the paper?" Her voice wasn't quiet. "The one who chained up that dog." Harold's mouth opened. No sound came out. 5 years. The woman shook her head, slow and deliberate. What kind of person does something like that? The cashier stopped scanning. Beep. Silence. The man behind Harold took a step back, like cruelty might be contagious. Everyone was looking. Harold's face went from hot to cold. His vision narrowed. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the piped-in music too loud. He let go of the cart. Apples, bread, milk, margarine, all of it. He walked out of the store. Didn't run. Forced his legs to move at a normal pace, even though every nerve in his body screamed to flee. The parking lot stretched in front of him. Vast. Empty. His truck was at the far end, 100 miles away. He could feel eyes on his back, through the windows, from the other shoppers loading groceries into their cars, watching him walk away, watching, the way he'd never watched Rex. The house was silent when he got home. Harold sat in the living room, same chair he'd sat in for 30 years. The television was on, volume muted. Blue light flickered across the walls, across the furniture Margaret had picked out, across the photographs she'd hung their wedding, their first house, the dog they'd had before Rex, a golden retriever named Sonny. He'd forgotten about Sonny until just now. He looked at that photograph, him and Margaret, young and smiling, Sonny between them, tongue lolling, tail a blur of motion. When had he stopped smiling like that? The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The clock on the wall ticked. The house smelled like dust and old coffee and something sour underneath dishes he hadn't washed. Trash he hadn't taken out. Margaret called on Thursday. He was sitting in the dark when the phone rang. Hadn't turned on a light in hours. Hadn't moved from the chair except to use the bathroom. "Harold." Her voice was flat, tired, the voice of a woman who'd stopped expecting anything. "I'm staying at Linda's for a while." "How long?" Silence. "I don't know. I need time. To think." "About what?" She didn't answer right away. He could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in Linda's kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, trying to find words for things they'd never talked about. "I saw the paper," she said finally. "Everybody saw it. I didn't do anything." "Stop." Her voice cracked. "Stop saying that. You keep saying it like it'll make it true." "Margaret, I have to go." The line went dead. Harold sat in the dark, phone in his hand, dial tone humming. He stopped shaving. The stubble came in gray and patchy. He caught glimpses of himself in mirrors, the bathroom mirror, the hallway mirror, the dark reflection in the television screen, and looked away. He stopped eating regular meals. A can of soup here, crackers there, coffee, always coffee, until his hands shook from the caffeine and his stomach burned. The mail piled up on the porch. He stopped bringing it in. The phone rang sometimes. He stopped answering. One night he'd lost track of which night, which week he found himself standing in the bathroom. The mirror was above the sink. He hadn't really looked at it in days. He looked now. An old man stared back, unshaven, eyes hollow, rimmed with red, shirt stained coffee, maybe, or soup, hair unwashed, sticking up at odd angles. When had this happened? When had he become this? The photograph sat on the counter. Him and Margaret and Sonny, 1989. A different man. A different life. He picked it up. His hand shook. The man in the photograph was smiling, arm around a dog who loved him, arm around a wife who still looked at him like he was worth looking at. "Why didn't I just pet him?" The words came out cracked, broken. "Just once. Why didn't I just—" He couldn't finish. The photograph slipped from his fingers, hit the tile floor. The glass cracked down the middle, splitting his younger face in two. Harold's legs gave out. He slid down the wall. The tile was cold through his pants, cold like concrete, cold like a chain in winter. He sat on the bathroom floor. 62 years old, alone in a house that echoed with silence, a wife who couldn't look at him, a town that saw him as a monster, a dog who had learned to stop hoping because hoping hurt too much. And for the first time since his father's funeral, Harold Peterson cried. Not for Rex. Not yet. For the man in the photograph. For the man he used to be. For the slow, invisible moment. And he still couldn't name when it happened, when he'd stopped being a person and started being a function. A provider. A presence. A man who walked past living things without seeing them. The way everyone was walking past him now. The tears came hard, ugly. His body shook against the cold tile. He cried until there was nothing left. And in the silence that followed, a thought formed. Small. Quiet. Impossible to ignore. What if they were right? What if he was exactly what they said he was? And what if there was still time to be something else? 3 days passed. Harold showered for the first time in a week. The water ran cold before he got out. He'd forgotten how long he'd been standing there, watching the gray swirl down the drain, He shaved. Slowly. Carefully. The razor caught on stubble grown too long. Pink lines appeared on his jaw, his chin, his neck. He didn't wipe them away. He put on clean clothes, not the Sunday suit, just a button-down shirt and his work pants. The shirt smelled like the back of the closet, mothballs and cedar and time. He didn't call his lawyer, didn't craft an argument, didn't rehearse what he was going to say. He just drove. The shelter parking lot was half empty. Tuesday morning, most folks were at work. A woman came out the front door carrying a cat in a cardboard carrier. The cat meowed, a long, plaintive sound that carried across the asphalt. Harold sat in his truck for 5 minutes. 10. His hands rested on the steering wheel. Not gripping. Just resting. The engine ticked as it cooled. Then he got out. The front desk smelled like dog food and floor cleaner. A fan rattled somewhere overhead, pushing air that had been breathed too many times. Emily looked up from a stack of paperwork. Her face changed when she saw him. Hardened. Get out. Harold stopped. His hands hung at his sides. I'm not here to take him. Then why are you here? He didn't answer right away. His throat worked, swallowing something that wouldn't go down. I need to see him. One time. No. Please. The word hung in the air, foreign in his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he'd said it. Emily stared at him. Her jaw was set, her eyes flat. But something flickered there, not sympathy. Exactly. Curiosity. Maybe. Wait here. She disappeared through a back door. He could hear voices, low, urgent. His feet ached. He hadn't realized he was standing so rigid. She came back. Her expression hadn't changed. Supervised. 5 minutes. You don't touch him. You don't call his name. You stay on your side of the fence. Understood. Harold nodded. The outdoor yard was behind the main building. Chain-link fence, 6 feet high. Grass worn thin in patches from dogs running the same circuits day after day. A wooden bench along one side, weathered gray by sun and rain. Rex lay in the middle of the yard. His coat was thick now, filled in, glossy in the morning light. His eyes were clear. He lay with his head on his paws, watching a sparrow hop along the fence line. Sarah sat beside him on the grass. A tennis ball lay between them, bright yellow, untouched. She was saying something to him. Harold couldn't hear what her hand resting on his shoulder. Emily led Harold to the fence. Stopped 10 feet away. Here. Harold walked the last 10 feet alone. His boots crunched on gravel. The sound seemed too loud. He reached the fence, wrapped his fingers around the chain link. The metal was cold, even in the morning sun. Rex's head lifted. For a moment, nothing. Just a dog looking at a man. Then recognition. Rex's ears flattened against his skull. His body tensed. He pressed closer to Sarah, pushing against her leg, making himself small. He remembered. Harold saw the fear he'd put there. 5 years of nothing. And the only thing the dog remembered was the nothing. His knees buckled. He didn't decide to kneel. His legs just gave out. He sank to the ground beside the fence, gravel biting into his knees through his work pants. I'm sorry. The words came out cracked, barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I told myself you were just a dog. That dogs don't need. That it didn't matter what I did or didn't do. His voice broke. He pressed his forehead against the chain link. The metal dug into his skin. But it mattered. It mattered, and I knew it. I knew it every time I walked past that window. Every time I heard the chain. I knew. And I did nothing. Rex watched from behind Sarah, not moving closer, not running away. Just watching. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand any of this. Harold reached into his jacket. His fingers found the folded paper he'd been carrying it for 2 days, waiting for the courage to do something with it. He pulled it out. Legal document. Official surrender of ownership. His signature at the bottom. Notarized at the bank yesterday by a woman who wouldn't meet his eyes. He slid it under the fence. The paper caught on the grass. Fluttered once. Lay still. He's yours now. Legally. Permanent. I won't fight it. Won't call again. He pushed himself to his feet. His knees ached. His hands shook. He looked at Rex one last time. The dog was still pressed against Sarah, still watching him with those eyes that had seen too much nothing. I hope you get everything I didn't give you. He turned. He walked back across the gravel. Past Emily. Past the bench. Each step took him further from the fence, further from the dog, further from the man he'd been for 5 years. He didn't look back, not because he didn't care, because looking back wouldn't undo a single day. Only moving forward might. Emily picked up the paper from the grass. She unfolded it. Read it twice. Checked the signature, the notary stamp, the legal language. Valid. Sarah was watching her. Rex had emerged from behind her legs, his nose pointing toward the parking lot where Harold's truck was pulling away. What just happened? Emily stared at the document. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. I think he finally saw it. Saw what? What we saw. What Rex saw. The empty space where a person should have been. Rex watched the road. Harold's truck turned onto the main street, grew smaller, disappeared behind a row of trees. His tail twitched. Once. Just once. Not forgiveness. A dog doesn't understand forgiveness. Not understanding. Either he couldn't understand why the man who'd ignored him for 5 years had just knelt in the gravel and wept. Just acknowledgement. That something had happened. That something had changed. He turned back to Sarah. The tennis ball lay on the grass between them. Yellow. Bright. Untouched for weeks. Rex lowered his nose. Sniffed it. Then he did something he'd never done before. He nudged it toward her. Sarah's breath caught. Her eyes filled. She picked up the ball. Looked at Rex. He was watching her. Waiting. His tail beginning to move slow. Uncertain. But moving. You want to play? She threw the ball. Not far. Just a few feet. Rex bounded after it. Picked it up in his mouth. Brought it back. Dropped it at her feet. And waited for her to throw it again. 2 days later, the adoption was finalized. Sarah signed the last form at 10:47 a.m. Her hand was steady. The pen scratched against the paper, a sound like leaves skittering across pavement. Emily stamped the approval. Red ink. Final. He's yours. Sarah looked through the window at Rex, lying on his blue bed in the kennel. He was watching her. Had been watching her since she walked in. Yeah, she said. I reckon he is. She loaded Rex into her car, the old Subaru with the bad brakes and the coffee stain on the passenger seat. He jumped in on his own. First time he'd done that, jumped anywhere. Chosen to move towards something instead of away. He sat in the back seat, nose pressed to the window, breath fogging the glass. Sarah adjusted the rearview mirror. Caught his eye. Ready to go home. His ears perked forward. He didn't know the word. Not yet. He would. The house sat at the end of Maple Street, white clapboard, blue shutters, 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, a yard with no fence. Sarah had lived here for 12 years, 8 of them with David. The last 4 alone. She pulled into the driveway. Gravel crunched under the tires. The engine shuddered off. She walked around to the back door, opened it. Rex jumped down. His paws touched the driveway, new ground, unfamiliar ground. He stood still for a moment, nose working the air. "Come on," Sarah said. "Let me show you around." The kitchen smelled like coffee and toast. The living room smelled like old books and the lavender sachets she kept in the closet. The bedroom smelled like her soap and chalk dust and something floral from the lotion she used before bed. Rex followed her through each room, slowly, carefully. His nails clicked on the hardwood floors. His eyes tracked every corner, every shadow. Then the back door. Sarah opened it, stepped onto the porch. The yard stretched out before them. Grass, real grass, green and soft. A maple tree in the corner, leaves just starting to turn. A bird feeder hanging from a low branch. Empty now, but she'd fill it tomorrow. No fence, no chain, no circle of dead earth. Rex stood in the doorway. His body went rigid. Sarah walked out first, sat down in the grass, the way she'd sat on the floor of the meeting room. Waited. 1 minute. 2. Rex took a step, then another. Then he was standing in the middle of the yard, sun on his face, wind ruffling his fur. He looked around, at the grass, at the tree, at the sky, wide and blue and endless. He lay down, rolled onto his side, stretched his legs out, all 4 of them, as far as they would go. For the first time in 6 years, he took up as much space as he wanted. Night came slow. Sarah sat on her bed, papers spread across the quilt. Spelling tests. 23 of them. Red pen in her hand. The lamp threw warm light across the room. In the corner, the blue dog bed from the clinic. Emily had given it to her. "He's used to it," she'd said. "Might help him settle." Rex lay on it, deeply asleep. His paws twitched, chasing something in his dreams. Rabbits. Maybe. Or nothing at all. Sarah looked up from her grating, watched his chest rise and fall. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. Not empty, not pressing, just peaceful. She went back to her papers. Received. RECIEVED. Wrong. She circled it in red. A sound, soft, padding on the hardwood. She looked up. Rex stood at the edge of the bed, watching her. He'd never done this before. Never approached her bed. Never asked for anything. She lifted the corner of the quilt. Just a little. An invitation. Rex jumped up. Circled once, twice, settled at her feet, his weight warm against her legs through the blanket. He let out a long breath. His eyes closed. Sarah set down her pen, reached down, rested her hand on his shoulder. His fur was soft now, clean, warm. Outside. The Ohio night was quiet. No chains, no circles, no whimpering through storm windows. Inside, there was warmth, there was breath, there was rest. 2 creatures who'd spent years waiting, one for someone to see him, one for a reason to come home. Neither of them was waiting anymore. Friends. The story was never really about a dog. It was about the things we walk past every day, the suffering we train ourselves not to see, the silence we mistake for peace. Rex survived because one woman finally picked up the telephone, because another woman sat on a cold floor all night, because a stranger chose patience over judgment, because a man who'd lost himself found the courage to kneel in the gravel and say the hardest words there are. We all have a Rex somewhere in our lives. A neighbor growing quiet, a friend pulling away, a creature human or otherwise fading in plain sight. The question isn't whether we notice. The question is what we do next. Thank you for listening. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction inspired by countless real animal rescue stories shared by shelters and advocacy organizations across America. It was created solely for entertainment and emotional reflection purposes. This narrative does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of animal neglect, abuse, or harmful behavior toward any living creature. All characters, names, locations, and events depicted in this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental and unintentional.